Hi, I'm Sophie Adelman. I'm the head of sales for Europe for Hired. I'm going to talk a little bit about taking an American company international. We had a panel earlier that talked about taking a French company international, taking it to the US. I think a lot of the same lessons that have been learnt from that will be also in this presentation today. What is Hired? Hired is a marketplace that connects talent with companies. We're in 17 markets, primarily in the US, but also in Europe and in Asia. We're definitely still on the internationalization journey. So there's nothing I'm going to say which is this is how you should do things. Hopefully there's some thoughts for you to take away and to think about as you're growing your businesses. And for those of you that work for an American company that are bringing that business to Europe, hopefully there'll be some lessons for you to know about. So we work with about 4,000 companies worldwide, and we have about 25,000 candidates applying to the platform every week. So some of the lessons that we've learned so far over the last couple of years since we started with the internationalization journey in 2014. First of all, how did we structure the business? We started with a GM structure. Now, many of you will know that Uber has a GM structure where they put somebody into a market. That person is essentially the CEO of their business. And they give them free range to do whatever they want to drive both sides of the marketplace. Supply, demand, marketing, everything that needs to happen. And that's the structure that we implemented when we first started at Hired. Now, there are lots of advantages of that model. First of all, you have somebody who's massively passionate about growing a business. They have a sort of get shit done attitude. They really believe in what they're doing, and they have all the tools at their disposal from a budget point of view to actually make things happen. But there are some real problems with that model. You get teams going rogue, you have no consistency, there's a lack of sharing of best practice across organizations, and as you scale, it's very hard to implement processes across the business that are consistent. So then, after a while, we decided to think about this structure and think about what would actually work better. And we've moved to a more centralized structure where marketing, engineering, product is all managed centrally. But we have a local sales model. So in Europe, we have sales teams who work in each of their various markets. And that sales organization globally sort of syncs up and shares best practices about account management, prospecting, ways to work with clients. But essentially, it's a centralized model. Now, again, there are lots of advantages of that model. For example, it creates a lot of efficiency. Everyone sitting together in HQ, from a communication point of view, it's very effective. But there are lots of problems with that. You know, if you have a sales team sitting a long way away from decision makers, they can feel very isolated. They can feel that they don't have control over their ability to make, to drive the marketplace in the way that they want. So we're now reevaluating again, how do we structure this business? And one of the things we're thinking about is moving to more of a regionalized structure, where certain functions do sit centrally, those where there is an advantage of having sort of a scale sitting together. For example, certain marketing activities, engineering, product. But we are starting to regionalize other parts of the business. So we will have events, local management of marketing, we'll have sales, we'll have talent sitting locally. Probably at some point we'll have a corporate HQ in Europe and in Asia. We'll manage finance and HR. So switching up the structure to scale is pretty important. And one of the reasons for mentioning this when I'm talking about taking an American company international is a lot of American businesses think they can operate everything from their HQ in San Francisco. And as we'll discover, there are lots of problems with doing that. The second thing I think is worth mentioning is the importance of hiring the right people. Now, I work for a business that's trying to disrupt recruitment. I'm going to mention hiring the right people at some point, but it is absolutely key. And I do think that when you are thinking about taking a business international, one of the most important things to remember is the first hire that you put in on the ground is going to be absolutely key. They've got to understand the culture. They've got to have passion and drive. They're going to be hiring the rest of the team. Now, I would say that also because I was the first international hire for Hired. But I do think it's actually very true, whichever market you go into. So some points to think about, hire for network, hire for passion, hire for personal brand and values. And I think values is really key. You're hiring somebody who's going to be the representative of your business abroad. You have to believe in them, they have to believe in you, because ultimately you're giving them free rein to go and sell your business abroad. Hire for someone that's smart enough to figure things out on their own, especially if there's a significant time difference. And hire for people who have that kind of get shit done attitude, not somebody who wants to manage a team and just hire. They've got to be able to roll up their sleeves and do the dirty work, whether that's photocopying or going out and pitching clients or hiring a great team. I think the timing of the hire and setting them up for success is really important. And this is where I'd say, we didn't do a very good job. When I was hired, I joined, and 2 weeks later we launched the market. I spent my first week literally running around London, meeting lots of potential clients and pitching the business. What we should have actually done is spent time doing diligence on the market, coming up with a good strategy, working out what the supply and demand balance looked like. Instead, we sort of just rolled in and tried to build this business. So a lesson learned from us, which I hope you will take on, is hire somebody, train them, get them to HQ, show them how the business works, set them up for success. The other thing to remember is your first hire and the first hires in a new market are absolutely key, but needs do change as the business grows. We're now 200 people. When I joined, we were 50. And some people will scale, and some people won't. And that's okay. And I think it's really important to remember that you are going to have to change some people, and you should set expectations early that maybe not everyone will be there. We're starting to now see attrition from the business in a good way, mostly. And it's really important that you do set expectations within your business that not everyone will be able to scale with it. So once you've hired the right people, how do you make sure that they feel that they are part of the business? How do you make sure that they are getting what they need? How do you make sure that best practice is being shared? Well, I think this comes down to communication and visibility. None of this stuff is rocket science, but it's surprising how few businesses that operate internationally do this well. So, some of the challenges of working in a remote office include time difference. I work for a business where our HQ is in San Francisco. There's an 8-hour time difference. One of my colleagues sits in Hong Kong. Sometimes I have to do 11 p.m. calls. That's unfortunate, but that's the reality of working in a global business. When you are actually communicating, making sure you have FaceTime, and FaceTime goes both ways. It's having Skype calls, it's having Google Hangout calls, it's being visible. It's getting back out to HQ, but it's also about having the executives in your teams fly out and spend time in the local offices, feel their pain. There's nothing like having your CEO sitting in the London office, working all day and then getting 200 emails coming into his inbox at 5 p.m. for him to realize how painful it can be to sit in London or sit in Paris and have to deal with the time difference. Communication, as you work in a scaling company also, is very much focused on waterfalling communication and escalating communication. If there's a problem with the product, who and how does that message get escalated to the people who need to know in HQ? And conversely, how does a decision in HQ get waterfalled down to people on the ground so they feel like they're part of the decision-making process, so they feel like they understand what's going on in the business? We do things like we have Slack channels, which can be great, but you should never make decisions over Slack because of the time difference. We also have weekly huddles. We have a communication cadence within the organization to allow for that kind of communication process to happen. Remote management. Remote management works fine if you are a more senior person, but remember that if you have more junior people in the team, they probably need a local manager. So thinking about how you set up management structures as you scale is also important. And the final thing really I wanted to mention on here is, as you get to a 200-person company, you might want to implement a decision-making process. We use something called Rapid, which allows us to more quickly make decisions, because when you have a small company, everyone thinks they're a decision maker. Everyone thinks they should be involved in making decisions about product or strategy. And actually, once you get to 200 people, you cannot have everyone in the business being part of a decision-making process. So you have to work out who the inputters are and who the decision makers are. I'm going to quickly go through this one, but I think actually this is really important. So one of the things that I've noticed is how much of a cultural distance there is between the American business and a European business. And I can only really talk about a couple of different European markets. But the fact that there is a common language, a lot of people in the room, everyone in the room pretty much speaks English, doesn't mean that there are common values, common culture, or a way to actually to speak about different things. So in the States, when you sell, it's completely fine to do a very salesy demo, be slightly slick. Self-promotion is absolutely fine. In London, that's not seen as something that people do, and that translating that to your American colleagues is really important. So one of the things I wanted to mention is that you need to educate your American counterparts that there is a cultural distance between you and them, that common language doesn't equal common culture. There are obviously other things to do with differences in legal frameworks and HR issues, and the fact that Europe isn't a monolithic entity. A lot of Americans say, oh yeah, we're in Europe. Where in Europe? I mean, it's very different in France to the UK, or Italy, or elsewhere. Selling styles really do differ. I mean, working in a sales organization, one of the things I try and really emphasize is the fact that we should have the same product experience globally, but with different flavors. And I like to use the McDonald's analogy. In other words, you go to McDonald's in India, you will get the same, you'll get somebody wearing the same kind of hat, you'll have a similar experience, but probably the food will taste slightly different because they've adapted to the local culture. And that's something that I think is really important. So the messaging and how you sell needs to be different, even if the actual content of the messaging is the same. The other final thing to remember is if you are an American company coming to another market, you don't want to be that big American company that comes in and just does it their way. You need to adapt to local culture, and one of the ways to do that is around developing a community approach, community evangelism, brand development, and being an authentic part of the community. Finally, I just want to mention acquisitions. Now, many of you know that we acquired the Breeze team in Paris as part of our decision to move into the French market. It's a great success for us. The guys are here. But a lot of people think that the M&A part of an acquisition is the hard bit, the negotiations. It's tough. I used to work in finance. I know that there are parts of the diligence process that are a bit painful and part of the negotiations process that are a bit painful. But the really hard bit is actually the integration part. And having sat on the side, it's taken us 6 months, we're now fully integrated. The reason for that is because we acquired a team where there was a great culture fit. So the one thing, if you are thinking about acquiring a business, is to make sure that you share the same values as the team. You are fully aligned in terms of culture, because integration is always going to be painful. There are going to be differences of opinion, and you need to be aligned. Integration can involve legal, financial, lots of other things, but really the thing I want to emphasize is it is a bit like getting married. You're acquiring a team that have been running their own business, and you do need to remember that you need to see eye to eye, and you need to be aligned on lots of different things above and beyond how much you're paying to acquire them. The final thing on this is when you do acquire them, utilize their strengths, listen to them, learn from them. Make sure that you're bringing these amazing people on board who've built a fantastic business that you thought was good enough, great enough to buy. Make sure that you're actually utilizing their strengths, and don't break their engine. So just to find a few final takeaways on this particular topic. Organizations break at different points as they scale. So don't be afraid to reevaluate the structure. It's really important that when you make your first hire, that you hire somebody local who understands the local culture, and that breaking into that new market with a local person, the right person, is going to really set you up for success. Communication with and the visibility of local teams really does drive success. You do not want a team to feel isolated and on their own. It's very important also to be sensitive to and embrace the cultural differences, and to educate your American colleagues that there is a difference between working in France and Germany. And finally, acquisition can really help you scale fast, but buyer beware. Make sure that you are aligned culturally, and make sure that you have sorted out that you really do want to spend the next year working with those people before you go through with the acquisition. Thank you.